The chandeliers in the grand ballroom scattered light like handfuls of diamonds tossed carelessly across the ceiling. Each crystal caught the warm glow and multiplied it, creating a universe of stars above the heads of New York's elite. I adjusted the collar of my simple black dress, the only formal attire I owned, feeling the rough fabric scratch against my collarbone. The dress had been on sale, a lucky find at a second-hand shop, but standing among women draped in designer silks and men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, I felt the cheapness of it like a brand on my skin. "More champagne, miss?" A server glided past with a tray of flutes, bubbles rising to the surface like my anxiety. "No, thank you." My voice was barely audible above the orchestra and the cultured laughter of the guests. I didn't belong here, in this palatial mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by people who had never worried about making rent or choosing between groceries or electricity. 6 weeks ago, I was just Sophia Riley, a 26-year-old art history graduate, working as a waitress at an upscale restaurant to pay off my student loans. Now I stood in the home of one of the most dangerous men in the city, waiting to meet his father. All because I had spilled red wine on the wrong man's custom suit. The memory made my stomach clench. I could still feel the cold dread that had washed over me when the restaurant had gone silent, when those dark eyes had locked onto mine, eyes that belonged to Alessandro Ricci, heir to an empire I hadn't known existed until that night. I'd expected to be fired, maybe even sued for the ruined suit. I hadn't expected him to return the next day, requesting me specifically as his server, or the day after that, or the flowers that began appearing at my apartment door, an apartment he shouldn't have known the address of. "There you are." His voice came from behind me, sending a shiver down my spine that wasn't entirely fear. Alessandro materialized at my side, one hand settling possessively on the small of my back. He was breathtaking in a black suit that fit him like a second skin, his dark hair swept back from his forehead, his jaw clean-shaven and sharp enough to cut glass. The cologne he wore smelled expensive and masculine, sandalwood and something darker I couldn't name. "You disappeared," he said, his Italian accent more pronounced tonight than usual. His thumb traced small circles against my spine. "I told you to stay where I could see you. I needed some air," I replied, resisting the urge to lean into his touch. That was the problem with Alessandro. My body responded to him in ways my mind rebelled against. There are so many people. His eyes scanned the room, cataloging faces, exits, potential threats. Alessandro never relaxed. Not completely. Even now, surrounded by what I assumed were allies and associates, 2 of his men stood within eyesight, their attention trained on us. Marco, his driver and most trusted guard, lingered near the entrance, his hand never far from the bulge under his jacket. "My father has arrived," Alessandro said, his grip tightening slightly. "He's eager to meet the woman who has been taking up so much of my time." My heart skipped. I didn't realize he was the guest of honor. Alessandro's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Every event is in my father's honor, whether he attends or not. He rarely leaves Italy these days." The implication hung in the air between us. This visit was significant, and so was my introduction. Why Alessandro wanted to parade me in front of his father like some prize, I still didn't understand. I was nothing to these people, a waitress from a middle-class family in Pennsylvania who'd moved to New York with dreams of working in a museum someday. Dreams that seemed increasingly distant with every day I spent in Alessandro's orbit. What if he doesn't like me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Alessandro turned to face me fully, his hands moving to grip my upper arms. His fingers were warm through the thin material of my dress. That isn't a possibility I'm concerned about. His gaze was intense, almost feverish. "You're mine now, Sophia. My father will respect that. Mine." The word both thrilled and terrified me. It had been that way since the beginning. Since he'd started appearing at the restaurant, leaving gifts at my door, coincidentally showing up at the coffee shop where I took my breaks. I should have been scared. I should have reported him, changed jobs, moved apartments, but there was something in the way he looked at me, like I was precious and rare, that made me hesitate just long enough for curiosity to overcome caution. I hadn't known who he really was then. By the time I discovered the truth about the Ricci family, the businesses they controlled, the blood on their hands, I was already in too deep. "Come," Alessandro said, his hand sliding down to capture mine. "It's time." He led me through the crowd, which parted for him like water. People nodded respectfully as we passed, their eyes lingering curiously on me before darting away when Alessandro's gaze met theirs. The message was clear. Look, but not too long. Admire, but from a distance. We entered a smaller room off the main hall, more intimate but no less opulent. Heavy velvet drapes framed floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto manicured gardens. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace large enough for me to stand in, casting dancing shadows across antique furniture and oil paintings of stern-faced men who shared Alessandro's strong jawline and penetrating stare. In the center of the room, seated in a high-backed leather chair like a king on his throne, was an older man with silver threading through his dark hair. His face was lined, but his posture was impeccable, his hands folded neatly over the head of a wooden cane. 5 men surrounded him, positioned like satellites around a planet, but it was clear who held the gravitational pull. Antonio Ricci, the patriarch of the family, the man who had built the Ricci empire from nothing, according to the whispered stories I'd managed to glean from news articles and cautious conversations with Marco's wife, Elena, the only person in Alessandro's circle who seemed to view me with anything resembling kindness. The conversation stopped as we entered. Antonio's dark eyes, so like his son's, fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to hide behind Alessandro. Instead, I straightened my spine and lifted my chin, the way my grandmother had taught me when I was nervous about my first day of school. Show fear, and they'll eat you alive, Piccola. Father, Alessandro said, the word laden with respect, and something deeper I couldn't quite identify. May I present Sophia Riley? Antonio Ricci studied me without speaking. The silence stretched uncomfortably, but Alessandro's grip on my hand prevented me from fidgeting. Then the older man spoke, his voice heavily accented but clear. So this is the girl who has bewitched my son. His eyes narrowed. Come closer, child. Let me look at you. Alessandro released my hand, giving me a slight nudge forward. I took 3 steps, then stopped, close enough to see the lines around Antonio's eyes, but far enough to maintain some semblance of personal space. You are not Italian, Antonio said. It wasn't a question. My father's family is Irish, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. But my mother's grandmother came from Florence. This seemed to surprise him, one silver eyebrow raising slightly. Yet you have been in my son's company for weeks, and never mentioned this connection to our homeland. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. Alessandro had never asked about my heritage. Our conversations had been dominated by his questions about my life, my dreams, my preferences. He collected facts about me like treasures, storing them away for reasons I couldn't fathom. It never came up, I said simply. Antonio made a sound somewhere between a snort and a laugh. Alessandro has always been selective in his curiosity. He switched to Italian, addressing his son in rapid-fire sentences I couldn't follow. Alessandro's response was terse, his jaw tight. Whatever his father had said clearly displeased him. The tension in the room thickened, the other men shifting uncomfortably. Antonio turned his attention back to me. Do you speak the language of your ancestors, Miss Riley? Here was my chance. To impress him, to ease the tension crackling in the air, to prove I wasn't completely out of my depth in this world of wealth and power and danger. My Italian was rusty, learned at my grandmother's knee during childhood summers and polished through college courses, but it was serviceable. I took a deep breath and responded in Italian, the words flowing more naturally than I had expected. Mi dispiace se ho causato problemi tra lei e suo figlio. Non era mia intenzione. Mia nonna mi ha insegnato che il rispetto per la famiglia viene prima di tutto, e posso vedere quanto Alessandro vi rispetti. The room went utterly silent. Even the crackling of the fire seemed muted. Antonio's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and the men around him exchanged glances. I heard Alessandro inhale sharply behind me. Had I made a terrible mistake? Said something offensive? My grandmother had taught me that respect for family comes before all else, and I had only meant to acknowledge the obvious reverence Alessandro had for his father. Antonio leaned forward slightly, his gaze searching my face as if seeing me for the first time. Your grandmother taught you well, he said finally, switching back to English. Family is everything. Without it, a man has nothing. His eyes flicked to Alessandro. My son seems to have found a woman with unexpected depths. The compliment, if it was one, warmed my cheeks. Alessandro was suddenly beside me again, his arm circling my waist in a grip that was both protective and possessive. Sophia continues to surprise me as well, Alessandro said, but there was an undercurrent to his voice I hadn't heard before. Irritation, perhaps, or something darker. His fingers pressed into my hip, not enough to hurt, but enough to communicate his displeasure. Antonio noticed. Of course he did. Nothing seemed to escape those shrewd eyes. "Come, sit beside me, Sophia," he said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Tell me about this grandmother of yours. She sounds like a woman I would have enjoyed meeting." I glanced uncertainly at Alessandro, whose face had become an unreadable mask. After a moment's hesitation, he released me with a curt nod. As I moved toward the chair, the air in the room seemed to shift and settle. I had passed some test I hadn't known I was taking, but the way Alessandro watched me, like I had revealed a secret he hadn't been privy to, told me that my victory might come with consequences I couldn't foresee. I sank into the chair beside Antonio Ricci, acutely aware that I had just altered the dynamics in a game whose rules I didn't fully understand. And as Alessandro took a position standing behind his father's chair, his eyes never leaving me, I realized with a chill that I might have traded one form of vulnerability for another. The conversation with Antonio flowed more easily than I could have imagined. He asked about my grandmother, Maria Rossi, before she became Maria Riley, and nodded appreciatively when I described her small apartment in Pittsburgh that had always smelled of basil and tomato sauce, the worn rosary beads she kept beside her bed, the old photographs of Florence that lined her walls. "She sounds like a true daughter of Italy," Antonio said, his weathered hands resting on his cane. "The old ways endure through women like her." Throughout our conversation, I was acutely aware of Alessandro behind us, silent, but radiating tension like a storm cloud about to break. The other men had dispersed throughout the room, giving us the illusion of privacy, while remaining close enough to attend to Antonio's needs if required. "And what of your parents?" Antonio asked, his dark eyes, so like Alessandro's, studying me with interest that seemed genuine. "Are they pleased about your friendship with my son?" The hesitation before friendship spoke volumes about what he assumed our relationship to be. The truth was more complicated. Alessandro had pursued me with single-minded determination, but there had been no intimacy beyond his possessive touches, his searing gazes, the occasional brush of his lips against my hand or cheek. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 19, I said, the familiar ache blooming in my chest. "It was just my younger brother and me after that." Antonio's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I am sorry for your loss. Family is sacred." "It is," I agreed, thinking of my brother Michael, who was finishing his engineering degree at Penn State, who called me every Sunday night to check in, who had no idea about the world I'd stumbled into, who would be horrified if he knew. "And your brother? What does he think of Alessandro?" My heart skipped. Had Alessandro told his father about Michael? Or was this just an intuitive guess? "They haven't met," I said carefully. "My brother is focused on his studies." Antonio studied me for a long moment, then nodded as if I'd confirmed something for him. "A smart woman protects what is precious to her." He turned slightly to address his son in Italian, too rapid for me to follow. Alessandro responded tersely, his voice tight. The exchange continued, growing more heated until Antonio raised a hand, silencing his son with the simple gesture. "Enough," he said, switching back to English. "We will discuss this later." His gaze returned to me, calculating but not unkind. "You must forgive an old man for being overprotective of his only son. Alessandro has never brought a woman to meet me before." This revelation sent a jolt through me. Never? Not once in all these years? The weight of it settled on my shoulders, making my simple black dress feel suddenly constricting. "I'm honored," I said, because it seemed like the only safe response. Antonio's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Honor. Yes, a rare quality these days." He shifted in his seat, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "Alessandro, help an old man to his feet. I should greet the other guests." Alessandro moved immediately to his father's side, supporting him as he stood. Despite his age and apparent frailty, Antonio Ricci commanded the room simply by existing within it. He was shorter than his son, but somehow seemed larger, his presence filling the space around him. "Miss Riley," he said, inclining his head toward me. "I look forward to continuing our conversation another time." As they moved toward the door, Antonio leaning slightly on his cane and his son's arm, he paused to say something privately to Alessandro. Whatever it was made Alessandro's posture go rigid, his hand curling into a fist at his side before he relaxed it with visible effort. Marco appeared at the doorway as if summoned, taking over escort duty from Alessandro. Antonio gave his son one last meaningful look before departing with his guard, leaving Alessandro and me alone in the room. The silence stretched between us, taut as a wire. Alessandro stood with his back to me, staring into the fire, his shoulders a hard line under his tailored jacket. I remained seated, uncertain whether to speak or wait for him to break the silence. When he finally turned, his expression was unreadable. You never told me you spoke Italian. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. You never asked. I've asked you about everything, he countered, moving toward me with the fluid grace of a predator. Your favorite color, the books that made you cry, the places you dream of visiting, your first kiss, how you take your coffee. I know the name of your childhood pet and the brand of shampoo you use. He stopped in front of me, looking down with eyes that burned. But somehow the fact that you speak my mother tongue never came up. I stood slowly, unwilling to remain at a disadvantage. Even so, he towered over me. It didn't seem important. He cut himself off with a sharp laugh that held no humor. You've spent weeks letting me translate menus for you, explain Italian phrases. You sat through an entire film with subtitles last weekend. Heat rose to my cheeks. It was true. I'd kept quiet about my knowledge of Italian, letting him assume I understood nothing when he spoke to Marco or Elena in his native language. I hadn't examined my reasons too closely, but now they seemed obvious. It had been a small rebellion, a secret kept in a relationship where he seemed to know everything about me while revealing so little of himself. I wanted to keep something for myself, I admitted, holding his gaze despite the anger I saw simmering there. You've taken over my life, Alessandro. You appear everywhere. You know everything. You've made it clear that I'm yours. The word caught in my throat. But I'm still me. I still have some choices. His eyes narrowed. Is that what you think? That I've taken your choices away? Haven't you? The words came out more forcefully than I intended. I still have the same job, but you own the restaurant now. I live in the same apartment, but your men watch the building day and night. My friends have stopped calling because they're afraid of you. The only person from my old life I still talk to is my brother, and I can't even tell him the truth about who you are. Alessandro stepped closer, eliminating the space between us. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentler than his expression suggested. I've given you everything, Sophia. Security, luxury, my attention. Do you know how many would kill to be in your position? I never asked for any of it, I whispered. I just wanted to apologize for ruining your suit. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Is that what you want? To go back to that life? Serving other men dinner? Living paycheck to paycheck in that tiny apartment? Looking at art in museums instead of owning it? His thumb traced my lower lip. Tell me you want to leave, and I'll let you walk out that door right now. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was he serious? Would he really let me go? Somehow, I doubted it would be that simple. Nothing with Alessandro was ever simple. What did your father say to you? I asked, instead of answering his question. Before he left, Alessandro's jaw tightened. My father thinks he knows what's best for everyone, especially me. And what did he say about me? His hand slid from my face to my throat, not squeezing but resting there, a reminder of his strength. He said, you're either exactly what I need or exactly what I should fear, that a woman who keeps secrets has power. His eyes searched mine. He likes you. Relief washed through me, though I wasn't entirely sure why Antonio's approval mattered. Perhaps because it was clear that Alessandro valued it, despite their tense interactions. He also said, Alessandro continued, his voice dropping lower, that if I truly want you, I should marry you before someone else recognizes your value. My breath caught. Marry me? We've known each other 6 weeks. We haven't even... I stopped, heat flooding my cheeks. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Alessandro's face. Haven't even what, Tesoro? His hand moved from my throat to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair. Haven't even kissed properly? Haven't shared a bed? Haven't given in to what we both know is inevitable? I should have stepped away. Should have maintained some distance, some dignity. Instead, I swayed toward him, drawn by the gravitational pull that had existed between us since that first night when I'd spilled wine on his suit and looked up to find those dark eyes fixed on me. Why me? The question that had burned in my mind from the beginning finally escaped. Of all the women in New York, beautiful, sophisticated women from your world, why pursue a waitress with student debt and no connections? Alessandro's smile faded, his expression turning serious. Because from the moment you looked at me, really looked at me, not at my money or my name or my power, I knew you were different. His free hand came to rest on my waist, drawing me closer. You saw me, Sophia. Not the Ricci heir, not the businessman. Just me. It was the most personal thing he'd ever said to me. a glimpse behind the controlled facade he maintained. And God help me, it made my heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "There you are," a female voice drawled from the doorway. We broke apart, Alessandro's arm remaining possessively around my waist as we turned to face the intrusion. Valentina Moretti stood in the entrance, resplendent in a blood-red gown that clung to her perfect figure, her dark hair swept up to reveal the graceful line of her neck. She was everything I wasn't: Italian, wealthy, connected. The daughter of one of Antonio's oldest associates, according to Elena's whispered information. "Your father is looking for you, Alessandro," she said in Italian, her gaze sliding dismissively over me before returning to him. "Something about introducing you to Senator Harrison's son." Her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'd be happy to keep your friend company while you're gone." The way she emphasized friend made it clear what she really thought of me. Alessandro's grip tightened on my waist, his body tensing beside mine. "Sophia comes with me," he said flatly. Valentina laughed, the sound like glass breaking. "To a business discussion? Surely not. Besides, I've been dying to get to know the woman who's captured so much of your attention lately." Her eyes met mine, glittering with malice. "We girls should stick together, shouldn't we?" Before Alessandro could respond, Antonio appeared behind Valentina, his expression stern. "Alessandro," he said. A word. For a moment, I thought Alessandro might refuse. His jaw worked as he looked from his father to Valentina to me. Finally, he bent to whisper in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "Stay in this room. If she says anything to upset you, walk away. I'll find you." Then he pressed his lips to my temple, the most intimate contact we'd shared yet, and released me to follow his father, leaving me alone with a woman who clearly viewed me as an enemy. Valentina waited until the men's footsteps faded, before she stalked further into the room, her red dress whispering against the marble floor. "So you're the latest distraction," she said, switching to English. She circled me slowly, like a shark scenting blood. "I must admit, you're not what I expected." I forced myself to stand still under her appraisal, refusing to show the insecurity that churned in my stomach. "And what did you expect?" "Oh, the usual type Alessandro amuses himself with when he's bored. Models, actresses, at least someone from a good family." She stopped in front of me, her smile sharp as a blade. Not a waitress playing dress-up. The barb hit its mark, but I kept my expression neutral. "You seem to know a lot about Alessandro's preferences. We grew up together," Valentina said, moving to pour herself a drink from the crystal decanter on a side table. "Our families have been connected for generations. There was a time when everyone assumed we would eventually marry." She took a sip, watching me over the rim of her glass. "Some still do." The casual revelation sent a cold shiver down my spine. Was that true? Had Alessandro been intended for this woman all along? It would make sense. The joining of two powerful families, a match arranged since childhood. "If that's the case," I said carefully, "why is he with me now?" Valentina laughed again, the sound devoid of warmth. "Oh, Cara, men like Alessandro always take diversions before settling down to their responsibilities. You're new, different, a brief escape from the world he was born into." She set her glass down and moved closer, her expensive perfume enveloping me. "But make no mistake, he will return to where he belongs, to people who understand him, who share his blood and his legacy." I wanted to argue, to throw Alessandro's words back at her, that he had never brought a woman to meet his father before, that he had spoken of marriage, but something held me back. Doubt, perhaps, or the growing awareness that I was in far deeper than I had realized, caught in currents I didn't understand. "You're very confident for someone who's clearly threatened," I said instead, surprising myself with the backbone in my voice. Valentina's perfect features hardened. "Threatened? By you?" She stepped closer, until we were nearly nose to nose. "Let me explain something, little waitress. The world you've stumbled into has rules you can't begin to comprehend. Alessandro might be fascinated by your novelty for now, but novelty fades. Blood endures." She dropped her voice to a whisper. "And if you think Antonio Ricci will ever allow his only son and heir to marry an American nobody with no connections and no understanding of our ways, you're even more naive than you look." I forced myself to hold her gaze, even as her words found every insecurity I'd harbored since the night Alessandro had first appeared at my apartment door with flowers and that intense, possessive stare. "Maybe you should let Alessandro make his own choices," I said. Maybe you should ask him about Florence, Valentina countered, her smile turning triumphant when confusion flashed across my face. Or about why he really bought that restaurant where you work. Or about what happened to the last man who showed too much interest in something Alessandro considered his. Before I could respond, the door opened again, and Alessandro returned. One look at my face, and his expression darkened. He crossed the room in long strides, positioning himself between Valentina and me. "What did you say to her?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Valentina's smile was pure innocence. "Just girl talk, Alessandro. Getting to know each other." She touched his arm lightly. "Your father wants to introduce me to the senator's son. Will you join us?" Alessandro removed her hand from his arm with deliberate care. "Leave," he said simply. Something flashed in Valentina's eyes. Hurt, anger, resignation, before she masked it with another brittle smile. "As you wish." She turned to me, venom dripping from her honeyed tone. "Lovely to meet you, Sophia. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again, while you're still around." She swept from the room in a cloud of red silk and expensive perfume, leaving tension crackling in the air behind her. Alessandro turned to me immediately, his hands coming up to frame my face. "What did she say to you?" I met his gaze steadily, my earlier doubts crystallizing into questions I could no longer ignore. "She said I should ask you about Florence, and about why you really bought the restaurant." His expression shuddered, the openness from our earlier conversation vanishing. "Valentina has always been jealous and spiteful. That doesn't answer my question." His hands dropped from my face, his jaw tightening. "This isn't the place for that conversation." "Then where is?" I challenged, emboldened by the turmoil of the evening, the unexpected connection with Antonio, the revelations about Alessandro's past with Valentina, the growing certainty that I was caught in something far more complex than a wealthy man's infatuation with a waitress. "When will you tell me the truth, Alessandro?" "All of it." Something shifted in his expression. A decision made. "Tonight," he said finally, "after we leave here. I'll take you somewhere private, and I'll tell you everything you want to know." He reached for my hand, his fingers twining with mine. "But first, we need to get through the rest of this evening. Can you do that for me?" I hesitated, torn between pressing for answers now and the promise of full disclosure later. Finally, I nodded. "Yes, but I'm holding you to that promise." Alessandro's thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, his expression unreadable as he studied me. "You continue to surprise me, Sophia Riley." As he led me back toward the main ballroom, where Antonio Ricci would be holding court among New York's elite, I couldn't shake Valentina's words, or the chill they had sent through me. Blood endures. Novelty fades. I had entered Alessandro's world thinking it was a simple case of attraction, of a powerful man used to getting what he wanted, setting his sights on me. Now I wasn't sure of anything, except that before the night was over, I would demand the truth, whatever it might cost us both. The remainder of the evening passed in a haze of forced smiles and polite conversation. Alessandro kept me at his side as we circulated through the crowd, his hand a constant presence at my waist, on my back, around my shoulders, marking me as his in ways that weren't lost on anyone watching. And people were watching, their curious gazes following us, as Alessandro introduced me to business associates, political figures, and family friends whose names blurred together in my memory. Antonio observed us from his place of honor, his dark eyes missing nothing. Occasionally he would summon Alessandro for private words, leaving me to stand awkwardly alone until my appointed guardian returned. During one such interlude, Elena, Marco's wife, appeared at my side with a glass of water. "You've caused quite a stir tonight," she said softly, her accented English warm and friendly despite the content of her words. "First with Antonio, now with Valentina. The old families are talking." I took a grateful sip of water, my throat dry from tension and forced small talk. "I didn't mean to cause problems." Elena's smile was sympathetic. "Intention rarely matters in this world, Kara. Only results." She glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. "Be careful with Valentina. Her family has been aligned with the Riccis for generations. Many expected her to marry Alessandro." "So she said," I murmured, watching as Alessandro spoke with his father across the room, their body language tense despite their composed expressions. "Were they ever together?" "There was an understanding," Elena said carefully. "Nothing official, but expectations in our world carry weight of their own." She touched my arm lightly. "Alessandro has never looked at any woman the way he looks at you. Not Valentina. Not anyone." The revelation should have been reassuring, but it only deepened my unease. Why me, though? I'm nobody. Elena's expression turned serious. We are all somebody to someone, Sophia. Her eyes flicked to where Marco stood guard near Antonio. I was just a school teacher when Marco found me. Love doesn't follow logic. Is that what this is? Love? The question escaped before I could stop it. Elena studied me for a moment. Alessandro doesn't do anything halfway. Whatever he feels for you, it's consuming him. She squeezed my arm once before letting go. Just remember, the more precious something is to him, the more fiercely he will guard it, the more completely he will own it. Before I could respond, Alessandro materialized at my side, his expression stormy as he nodded to Elena. Keeping my guest company, Elena? Very thoughtful. Elena dipped her head respectfully. Of course. Sophia is a delight. She excused herself with a final meaningful glance at me, disappearing into the crowd. What did she say to you? Alessandro asked, his voice low as his arm wound possessively around my waist. She was just being friendly, I replied, tired of his suspicion. Unlike most people here. Alessandro's lips pressed into a thin line as he surveyed the room. These people respect power and lineage. They're trying to determine where you fit. And where exactly is that? I challenged, keeping my voice down despite my frustration. What am I to you, Alessandro? Your girlfriend? Your possession? A novelty, as Valentina suggested? His fingers tightened on my hip. We're leaving, he said abruptly. I promised you answers and you'll have them, but not here. Without waiting for my response, he guided me across the ballroom toward his father. Antonio looked up as we approached, his shrewd gaze taking in Alessandro's tense posture and my flushed face. Leaving so soon? He asked, though his tone suggested he'd expected it. Sophia isn't feeling well, Alessandro replied smoothly. I'm taking her home. Antonio's eyes found mine, searching. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. Very well. He reached for my hand, his grip surprisingly strong for an elderly man. It was a pleasure to meet you, Miss Riley. I trust we will speak again soon. I'd like that, I said, and meant it despite everything. There was something about Antonio Ricci that commanded respect, a dignity that went beyond his obvious power. He patted my hand before releasing it, then said something to Alessandro in rapid Italian. I caught only fragments, careful and watching in what might have been protect her, before Alessandro nodded curtly. Marco will drive us, Alessandro said, steering me toward the exit. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. Marco appeared with the car, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, before we'd even descended the mansion's grand staircase. Another guard opened the rear door for us, his eyes scanning the darkness constantly. Once inside the vehicle, with privacy glass separating us from Marco in the front, Alessandro finally released me. The absence of his touch was both a relief and a loss. Where are we going? I asked, as Marco pulled away from the mansion, two other identical Mercedes falling into formation ahead and behind us. Somewhere we can talk privately, Alessandro replied, loosening his tie. In the dim light of the car, his profile was sharp as a blade, his jaw tight with tension. I gazed out the window at the lights of New York receding as we headed toward what appeared to be the harbor. I want the truth, Alessandro. All of it. The truth, he repeated, a bitter edge to his laugh. The truth is rarely simple, Sophia. Try me. He turned to face me fully, his expression unreadable in the shadows. What do you want to know first? I thought of Valentina's taunts, the questions that had been building since that first night. Florence. Why did Valentina tell me to ask you about Florence? Alessandro was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Because she knew it would unsettle you. Because Florence connects us in ways neither of us realized until tonight. What does that mean? Your grandmother, he said. Maria Rossi, from Florence. His gaze held mine. My grandfather was born in Florence. The Ricci family controlled most of the city for generations before my father moved our base of operations to New York. A chill ran down my spine. That's just a coincidence. Alessandro's smile held no warmth. I don't believe in coincidences, Sophia. When you spilled wine on my suit that night, when I looked into your eyes and felt something I'd never felt before, that wasn't chance. That was fate. You can't possibly believe I had you investigated, he cut in, his voice matter-of-fact. After the second time I came to the restaurant. Background checks, family history, standard procedure for anyone who catches my attention. Anger flared in my chest. Standard procedure. You had no right. I have every right to protect myself and my family, he countered. The name Maria Rossi didn't mean anything to me then, But tonight, when you greeted my father in perfect Italian, when you mentioned Florence, he shook his head. My father recognized the connection immediately. What connection? I demanded. So my grandmother was from the same city as your grandfather. That's hardly significant in a world where millions of Italians immigrated to America. Alessandro leaned closer, his eyes intense. The Rossis were once a powerful family in Florence, rivals to the Riccis, until my grandfather eliminated the competition and took control of their territories. The surviving Rossis fled, to America, to other parts of Europe. My blood ran cold. Eliminated? What does that mean? It means exactly what you think it means, Alessandro said quietly. This isn't a world of corporate takeovers and polite business acquisitions, Sophia. It's blood and territory and power. Are you saying— I could barely form the words, my mind reeling with implications. Are you saying my grandmother's family was involved with the Mafia? I'm saying your blood is as old and powerful as mine, that we come from the same world, whether you knew it or not. His hand found mine in the darkness. When I tell my father you're nobody, he sees a lie. He sees the descendant of his oldest enemies sitting beside his son. The car turned onto a private road, leading to what appeared to be a marina. Through the windshield, I could see lights reflecting off dark water, the silhouettes of yachts and smaller vessels bobbing gently in the night. This doesn't make sense, I said, trying to reconcile the grandmother I'd known, with her tomato sauce and rosary beads, with the world Alessandro was describing. My grandmother was just an ordinary woman. My mother was a kindergarten teacher. We were a normal family. Because Maria Rossi reinvented herself, Alessandro replied. She buried her past and built a new life, far from Florence and the blood feud that had decimated her family. She married an Irish-American and raised American children who knew nothing of their heritage. His expression softened slightly. But she taught you Italian. She kept that connection alive in you. The car stopped at a gated entrance to the marina. Marco exchanged words with a security guard, who immediately raised the barrier to allow our small convoy through. I don't believe you, I said, though doubt had begun to creep in. My grandmother had rarely spoken about her life before America. The few times I'd asked, she'd changed the subject, or given vague answers about troubled times in Italy. You don't have to believe me, Alessandro said, but it explains everything. Why I was drawn to you so powerfully. Why my father, who despises outsiders, accepted you so quickly once he realized who you are. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. It's in your blood, Sophia. The fire, the strength, everything I saw in you from the first moment. I pulled my hand away, my thoughts in chaos. So what are you saying? That you pursued me because of some twisted fascination with my family history? That I'm part of a revenge fantasy? Alessandro's eyes flashed dangerously. I pursued you because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were mine. Learning about your connection to Florence only confirms what I already felt, that we're bound by something older and deeper than either of us understood. The car came to a stop at the end of a private dock. Through the window, I could see a massive yacht, lit up against the night sky, its white hull gleaming in the moonlight. Is that yours? I asked, momentarily distracted by the sheer opulence of the vessel. One of several, Alessandro replied. But this one is special, my private sanctuary. He nodded to Marco, who came around to open the door. No one boards without my explicit permission, not even my father. As I stepped out of the car, the salt air filled my lungs. The yacht loomed above us, easily over 100 feet long, its decks rising 3 stories above the waterline. Soft lights illuminated the gangway, and I could see a crew member standing at attention, waiting to welcome us aboard. Alessandro placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me forward. My home on the water, he said, where we can speak freely, without eyes or ears reporting back to my father or Valentina's family. I hesitated at the foot of the gangway. If I board that yacht with you, am I leaving with more questions or actual answers? Alessandro's expression turned solemn. I swear to you, Sophia, tonight I will tell you everything, who I really am, what I want from you, why I bought the restaurant. His eyes held mine. And then you'll have a choice to make. What kind of choice? Whether to walk away from me forever, he said, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't identify, or to accept that some things, some people, are destined to be together, regardless of the past. Part of me wanted to turn and run, to go back to my tiny apartment and pretend the last 6 weeks had never happened. But a larger part, the part that had been drawn to Alessandro from the beginning, despite all logic and self-preservation, needed answers. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the gangway. Show me. The yacht's interior was a study in understated luxury. Gleaming wood, supple leather, tasteful artwork that I recognized as original pieces by masters. Alessandro led me through a main salon with panoramic windows, up a curved staircase to an upper deck, and finally into what appeared to be a private study. The room was masculine and elegant, with bookshelves lining one wall, a large desk dominating one corner, and comfortable seating arranged to take advantage of the view. A bar cabinet stood open, crystal decanters catching the light. Drink? Alessandro asked, moving to pour himself what looked like whiskey. No, thank you. I needed a clear head for whatever revelations were coming. Alessandro nodded, downing his drink in one swallow before setting the glass aside. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, draping it over a chair before loosening his tie further. The actions were oddly intimate, a man making himself comfortable in his private space. Sit, he said, gesturing to a leather sofa. This may take some time. I perched on the edge of the sofa, my back straight, hands folded in my lap. Alessandro remained standing, pacing slowly before stopping to look out the window at the lights of New York in the distance. My father built an empire, he began, his voice low and measured. He took what my grandfather had started in Italy and expanded it across continents. Legitimate businesses, shipping, construction, real estate, technology, and other ventures that operate in shadows. Criminal enterprises, I said plainly. Alessandro turned, his expression unreadable. The line between legal and illegal is often a matter of who writes the laws, Sophia. But yes, what you would call criminal enterprises, protection, gambling, certain controlled substances. You're admitting you're part of the Mafia. His smile was cold. That term is a media invention. We are a family with interests that sometimes fall outside conventional legal frameworks. Don't play word games, I said, anger giving me courage. You told me you'd give me the truth. Alessandro's eyes flashed, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement. Very well. Yes, the Ricci family has controlled what law enforcement calls organized crime in this region for 3 generations. My father expanded our operations globally. I have continued that expansion since taking over day-to-day operations 5 years ago. The casual admission sent a chill through me. This wasn't a movie or a book. This was real. A man standing before me, calmly discussing criminal empires as if he were talking about stock portfolios. And the restaurant? I asked, remembering Valentina's taunt. Alessandro's jaw tightened. I bought it the day after I met you, to keep you close, to ensure your safety. My safety was never in danger until I met you, I pointed out. You have no idea what dangers existed in your life before me, he countered. The difference is that now you have my protection. I stood, unable to remain still with the emotions churning inside me. So all of this, pursuing me, buying my workplace, the gifts, the coincidental meetings, it was all about control, about owning me. Alessandro moved toward me, his movements fluid and predatory. It was about wanting you, about knowing, from the first moment I saw you, that you belonged with me. He stopped just short of touching me. The restaurant was just the beginning. I've been watching over you since that night. Watching over me or watching me? I challenged. His smile was dangerous. Both. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means I know your routine, Sophia. The coffee shop where you stop every morning. The bookstore you visit on Sundays. The park bench where you sit to eat lunch when the weather is nice. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my skin. I know the names of your 3 closest friends, all of whom have gradually stopped calling because they sense something has changed in your life. I know your brother calls every Sunday at 8, and that you never tell him anything substantial about me. Horror and violation wash through me. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting what's mine, he corrected, learning everything about you, making sure you're safe. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I'm not yours. I never agreed to any of this. Alessandro's expression darkened. You accepted my gifts, my invitations. You let me into your life, because I didn't know who you really were. I thought you were just a wealthy businessman with an unusual interest in me. I never agreed to be stalked, to have my entire life monitored. And if I had told you the truth from the beginning? He asked. If I had said, I am Alessandro Ricci, heir to an empire built on blood and power, and I want you to be mine, would you have given me a chance? The question brought me up short. Would I have? The answer came more readily than I liked to admit. No. I would have run as far and as fast as possible. That's why I didn't tell you, Alessandro said, reading the truth in my silence. I needed you to know me. The man, not the name or the reputation, before you knew what I am. And what exactly are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro closed the distance between us again, his hands coming up to frame my face. This time I didn't pull away. I am a man who has never wanted anything or anyone the way I want you, he said, his eyes burning into mine. A man who would burn down the world to keep you safe. A man who, for the first time in his life, is willing to give someone power over him. My heart hammered against my ribs. What does that mean? It means I love you, he said simply. It means I want you by my side, as my equal, my partner, my wife. The declaration stole my breath. 6 weeks of intense pursuit, of mysterious gifts and longing gazes, and now this man, this dangerous, powerful man, was offering me everything. You can't possibly mean that, I said. You barely know me. I know everything about you, Alessandro countered. Your hopes, your fears, your strength. I know that you're the daughter of Maria Rossi's bloodline, whether you understood what that meant before tonight or not. I know that you're the only woman who has ever made me question my path, my purpose. His thumbs stroked my cheeks gently. I know that when you're not with me, I can't think of anything but finding you again. This is insane, I whispered. We come from different worlds. No, he said firmly. We come from the same world. You just didn't know it until now. His gaze intensified. Your grandmother fled from who she was, who her family was. She buried her heritage and her power. But it lives in you, Sophia. I saw it from the beginning. I pulled away from his touch, needing space to think. Even if what you're saying about my grandmother is true, and I'm not convinced it is, that doesn't make me like you. I'm not part of all this. I gestured vaguely at the yacht, at the wealth and power it represented. But you could be, Alessandro said. By my side, protected, cherished. His voice dropped lower. I would give you the world, Sophia. At what cost? I challenged. My freedom? My identity? The simple life I was building? Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. The simple life where you worked 60 hours a week to barely make rent? Where your art history degree gathered dust while you served drinks to men who didn't even see you? He moved closer again, his presence overwhelming. I see you, Sophia. I always have. The words echoed what he'd said earlier, and despite everything, they resonated deep within me. In the weeks since Alessandro had entered my life, I had felt seen in a way I never had before. Valued. Important. If what you say about my grandmother is true, I said slowly, if our families were rivals, doesn't that make this even more complicated? Your grandfather eliminated my family's power. Doesn't that make us enemies, not destined lovers? Alessandro's smile was dark and satisfied. What better way to unite two bloodlines than through marriage? To end an ancient feud? My father sees it. Why do you think he accepted you so quickly tonight? He reached for my hand, bringing it to his lips. The daughter of Rossi blood, the son of Ricci power. Together. The romantic in me, the part raised on fairy tales and grand gestures, wanted to surrender to the intoxicating vision he painted. But the practical, cautious part held firm. I need time, I said, to process all of this, to decide what I want. Alessandro studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Time, he agreed, but not distance. Not now that Valentina has seen you as a threat. Not now that the families know of your existence. His expression turned grave. The world I inhabit is dangerous, Sophia. Now that you've been connected to me publicly, that danger extends to you as well. Fear curled in my stomach. Are you threatening me? Never, he said fiercely. I'm warning you of threats that exist whether you choose to be with me or not. There are people who would use you to get to me now, who would see harming you as a way to hurt me. His hands gripped my shoulders. Let me protect you. Stay here, on the yacht, while you consider your decision. Alarm bells rang in my head. You want me to stay here? With you? The yacht has 6 guest staterooms, Alessandro said. You can have complete privacy, your own space. The crew will attend to your needs. You'll be safe here while you think. It sounded reasonable, but a voice in the back of my mind whispered that stepping further into Alessandro's world, onto his territory, would make it that much harder to leave if I decided to. And if I refuse? I asked. If I want to go home to my apartment tonight? Alessandro's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Then Marco will drive you home, and 4 of my best men will guard your building day and night until you've made your decision. His voice was calm, matter of fact. Either way, Sophia, your life has changed. The only question is whether you'll accept my protection willingly or force me to provide it from a distance. The truth of his words settled over me like a weight. There was no going back to before. Not now that I'd been seen with Alessandro at his father's event. Not now that Valentina had marked me as competition. Not now that I knew the truth about who Alessandro really was. I was caught in a current stronger than my ability to swim against it. 1 week, I said finally. I'll stay here for 1 week while I consider everything you've told me. But I need guarantees of my freedom. My brother needs to be able to reach me. I need to be able to leave if I choose to. Relief flashed across Alessandro's face before his features smoothed into a more controlled expression. Of course. You're not a prisoner, Sophia. You're a guest. He lifted my hand to his lips again. 1 week, and then you'll give me your answer. As I looked into his dark eyes, filled with possessive desire and something deeper, more complex, I wondered if I already knew what my answer would be. If I had known from the moment he'd first looked at me, spilled wine dripping from his ruined suit, his gaze locking with mine across the restaurant floor. 1 week? I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. Alessandro's smile was triumphant, as if he too sensed the inevitability of what was forming between us. A bond forged from ancient rivalries, modern power, and the inexplicable pull that had drawn us together from the beginning. Let me show you to your room, he said, offering his arm with old-world formality. Tomorrow we begin the rest of our lives, together or apart. Your choice. As I placed my hand on his arm and let him lead me deeper into the floating palace he called home, I couldn't shake the feeling that choice had very little to do with the path unfolding before me, a path that seemed to have been set in motion long before either of us was born, in the narrow streets of Florence where Ricci's and Rossi's had once fought for control, blood and destiny, power and surrender. As the door to my opulent stateroom closed behind me, leaving me alone with my thoughts for the first time since the revelation-filled evening had begun, I wondered which would ultimately prove stronger, my will or Alessandro's determination to make me his. Sleep eluded me that night, despite the luxurious comfort of the king-size bed in my stateroom. My mind raced with everything Alessandro had revealed, about himself, about my grandmother, about the dangerous world I'd unwittingly stepped into. By the time dawn broke, painting the horizon with stripes of gold and pink visible through my window, I'd made exactly 0 progress in deciding what to do. A soft knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I wrapped the plush robe I'd found in the ensuite bathroom around myself and cautiously opened the door. A young woman in a crisp uniform stood in the hallway, her expression professionally pleasant. Good morning, Miss Riley. Mr. Ricci asked me to inform you that breakfast is served on the aft deck whenever you're ready. I've brought coffee in the meantime. She offered a silver tray with a steaming mug and a small plate of pastries. Thank you, I said, taking the tray. I'll be out shortly. After she left, I sipped the coffee, prepared exactly how I liked it, with a splash of cream and no sugar. Of course, Alessandro would know that detail, too. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mixture of unease and something dangerously close to excitement. I showered and dressed in clothes that had mysteriously appeared in the closet overnight, all in my size, all in styles I would have chosen for myself. The collection ranged from casual to formal, suggesting Alessandro had anticipated a lengthy stay. My cheeks burned at his presumption, but I couldn't deny the practicality. I selected white linen pants and a pale blue blouse that reminded me of something I'd once admired in a boutique window, but could never afford. The yacht was even more impressive by daylight. As I made my way through corridors decorated with tasteful artwork and gleaming wood paneling, I passed crew members who nodded respectfully before continuing their duties. The vessel hummed with quiet efficiency, like a small floating city. I found the aft deck easily enough, following the scent of coffee and freshly baked bread. The space was open yet intimate, with comfortable seating arranged around a table laden with breakfast foods. Beyond the deck railing, the skyline of Manhattan glittered in the morning sun, the yacht having been repositioned to provide a perfect view of the city. Alessandro stood at the railing, his back to me, dressed in tailored pants and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He turned as I approached, as if sensing my presence, and the intensity of his gaze stole my breath. Whatever else he was, criminal, stalker, possessive, the man was devastatingly handsome. You slept poorly, he said. Not a question, but an observation. I lifted my chin. You would know, I suppose. His lips curved into a faint smile. I don't have cameras in your bedroom, if that's what you're implying. But I know you, Sophia. The shadows under your eyes tell their own story. He gestured to the table. Eat. We have much to discuss. I took a seat, hunger overcoming my irritation. The spread was impressive. Fruit, pastries, eggs prepared multiple ways, smoked salmon, freshly squeezed juices. Alessandro sat across from me, watching as I filled my plate. I had your things brought from your apartment, he said casually, pouring himself coffee. Clothes, personal items, the books from your nightstand. They'll be delivered later today. I set my fork down. You had someone go into my apartment without my permission? Marco's wife, Elena, he clarified, as if that made it better. I thought you might be more comfortable with another woman handling your personal items. The presumption stole my appetite. That's not the point, Alessandro. You can't just decide things for me. Enter my home, move my possessions. His expression remained impassive. Your lease expires next month. I assumed you wouldn't want to renew, regardless of your decision about us. My lease? How do you know when my lease expires? I own the building. The casual revelation sent a shock through me. Since when? Since the day after I met you. I pushed my plate away, my stomach churning. Is there any part of my life you haven't invaded? Alessandro set his cup down carefully. I prefer to think of it as securing your surroundings, ensuring your safety and comfort, by taking over my life without my knowledge or consent. His dark eyes met mine steadily. You never complained about the reduced rent, the upgraded security system, the repairs that were mysteriously completed overnight. You accepted these improvements to your life without question. He was right, and that made it worse. I had noticed changes. The building's broken entry system suddenly fixed, the eternally malfunctioning elevator working perfectly, my rent reduced by 20% due to a building-wide adjustment. I had accepted these improvements as rare good luck, never questioning their origin. That doesn't make it okay, I said, but my protest sounded weak even to my own ears. I protected what was precious to me, Alessandro said simply. I always will. The declaration hung between us, both a promise and a warning. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Tell me more about my grandmother, I said finally, about her family in Florence. You claim they were like yours. I need proof. Alessandro studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. He stood, extending his hand. Come with me. I hesitated before placing my hand in his, allowing him to lead me back into the yacht's interior. We descended a level and entered what appeared to be a state-of-the-art office. One wall was lined with computer monitors, another with books and files. Alessandro moved to a sleek desk and typed something on a laptop. Your grandmother's maiden name was Maria Rossi, born 1937 in Florence, daughter of Vincenzo Rossi and Lucia Conti. He turned the screen to show me a digital scan of what appeared to be an old document, a birth certificate. The Rossi family controlled most of Florence's northern district for 3 generations, specializing in art theft and forgery, protection of local businesses, and later, control of shipping routes through the port of Livorno. My mouth went dry as I stared at the document, at the name that matched my grandmother's. This could be anyone. Rossi is a common name. Alessandro nodded, unsurprised by my skepticism. It is. But this particular Maria Rossi disappeared from Florence in 1955, shortly after her father and 2 brothers were killed in what newspapers called a business dispute. He pulled up another document, a newspaper clipping with a headline in Italian. I could make out enough to understand it described a shooting that had left 3 members of a prominent family dead. That business dispute was my grandfather's work, Alessandro continued, his voice matter-of-fact. The final move in a power struggle that had lasted decades. The Ricci family took control of Rossi territories, absorbed their operations. The surviving Rossis scattered, Maria being one of them. He pulled up another document, a passenger manifest from a ship sailing from Naples to New York in 1955. There, among dozens of names, was Maria Rossi, age 18. She came to America alone, I murmured, trying to reconcile this information with the grandmother I'd known, the woman who baked cookies and taught me Italian lullabies. She carried the equivalent of what would now be about $2 million in cash and jewels, Alessandro said. The Rossi family emergency fund, enough to build a new life, to hide her identity, to become someone new. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. This can't be true. My grandmother was just a normal woman. She married my grandfather, an accountant for God's sake. They lived in Pittsburgh. They went to church on Sundays. Alessandro knelt before me, his hands covering mine. She reinvented herself, buried her past, became the woman you knew and loved. His eyes held mine. But blood remembers, Sophia. The fire in you, the strength I saw from our first meeting. That comes from generations of Rossi power. I pulled my hands away. This is insane. You're telling me my sweet grandmother who made me Easter bread and taught me to crochet was from some Mafia dynasty? I'm telling you that your grandmother was a survivor, Alessandro corrected. That she took the legacy of her family, their strength, their resilience, their power, and channeled it into building a new life, into protecting her children and grandchildren from the dangers she had known. His expression softened slightly. She succeeded, Sophia. She kept you safe, kept you innocent. But she couldn't change your blood. I stood abruptly, needing space. Even if this is true, and I'm not saying I believe it, it doesn't change who I am. I'm still just Sophia Riley, art history major turned waitress. I'm not some Mafia princess. Alessandro's smile was gentle but knowing. You've never been just anything, Tesoro. From the moment I saw you, I recognized something in you. A fire, a strength beyond ordinary people. Now I understand why. He approached slowly, as if afraid of startling me. You were born for more than serving drinks and living in a tiny apartment. You were born to stand beside me, to help me lead our world into a new era. The grandeur of his vision should have made me laugh. Instead, it sent a thrill through me that I immediately tried to suppress. You're talking about criminal enterprises, Alessandro. Illegal activities, hurting people. I'm talking about power, he countered. About building something lasting. Yes, parts of my business operate outside conventional laws, but I'm moving us toward legitimacy, expanding our legal holdings, investing in technology, real estate, art. His eyes lit up with genuine passion. Your art history degree wouldn't gather dust with me, Sophia. You could help build our collection, manage our patronage of museums and artists. The temptation in his words was seductive, a life where my education mattered, where I wouldn't struggle paycheck to paycheck, where I would stand as an equal beside a man who clearly adored me, but at what cost? And the illegal parts? I challenged. The violence? The threats? Would I be expected to participate in those too? Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. I would never expose you to that side of our operations. Never put you in danger or compromise your principles. He stepped closer. I protect what's mine, Sophia. Always. There it was again. That possessive claim that both thrilled and disturbed me. I'm not a possession, Alessandro. No, he agreed, surprising me. You're my equal, my partner. The only person I've ever met who makes me want to be more than what my father built. His hand came up to cup my cheek. With you beside me, I could transform our family's legacy, make it something we could both be proud of. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. For the first time, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. A man raised in darkness, seeing a possibility of light. I need time, I said again, pulling away from his touch. This is overwhelming. Alessandro nodded, dropping his hand. You have a week, as promised. Take today to settle in, to think. The yacht is at your disposal. The gym, the library, the sun deck. The crew will attend to whatever you need. He checked his watch. I have business to attend to in the city, but I'll return for dinner. You're leaving? I hadn't expected to be left alone so soon. The world doesn't stop turning because I've found the woman I want to spend my life with, he said with a slight smile. Though I wish it would. He moved toward the door, then paused. Marco will remain on board. If you need anything, or if you wish to go ashore, he'll accompany you. A babysitter, or a jailer, depending on how one looked at it. When will my brother call? I asked suddenly. It's Sunday. He always calls on Sundays. Alessandro's expression softened. I'll make sure your phone is returned to you before 8. You can take his call privately in your stateroom. He studied me for a moment longer. I'm not your enemy, Sophia. I never have been. After he left, I wandered the yacht in a daze, trying to process everything I'd learned. The vessel was even larger than it had appeared from the outside, with multiple lounges, a cinema room, a gym with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, and a library stocked with first editions. In that library, I found a photo album hidden among leather-bound classics. Inside were black and white photographs of stern-faced men and elegantly dressed women, the Ricci family through generations. I recognized Antonio in some of the later photographs, younger but still commanding, his arm around a beautiful woman who must have been Alessandro's mother. And there, in the oldest section of the album, was a photograph that made my blood run cold. A group of men standing outside what appeared to be a Florentine villa. The caption, written in faded ink, read, Vittorio Ricci celebrates acquisition of Rossi territories, 1955. The men were smiling, champagne glasses raised in victory. Behind them, partially visible, was what appeared to be a family crest carved into the villa's stonework. A rose wrapped around a sword, the same design I'd seen countless times as a child, on a ring my grandmother wore but never explained. My hands trembled as I closed the album. Alessandro hadn't been lying. The evidence was too specific, too consistent with fragments of memory from my childhood. My grandmother's reluctance to speak of Florence, her startled expression when I'd once asked about the ring, the way she'd taught me Italian but discouraged me from ever visiting Italy. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, moving from room to room, barely noticing the spectacular views or luxurious surroundings. Crew members appeared periodically to offer food, drinks, or assistance, but otherwise left me to my solitude. By late afternoon, I found myself on the sun deck, wrapped in a cashmere throw despite the mild temperature, staring at the Manhattan skyline. The city I'd moved to with such hope and ambition 4 years ago now seemed like a different world, one I'd been only playing at living in, unaware of the currents of power flowing beneath its surface. Ms. Riley? Marco's voice startled me from my thoughts. Mr. Ricci asked me to inform you that he's been delayed. He suggests you dine without him. The chef can prepare whatever you'd like. I nodded, not particularly disappointed. I needed more time to sort through my thoughts before facing Alessandro again. Thank you, Marco. Just something simple would be fine. Marco hesitated, then sat in a chair nearby, his usual stoic expression softening slightly. If I may, Ms. Riley. Elena asked me to check on you. She was concerned after last night. The mention of Elena, the only person in Alessandro's world who had shown me genuine kindness, broke through my numbness. Did she know? About my grandmother? About the connection between our families? Marco shook his head. No. That revelation surprised everyone, including Alessandro. His dark eyes studied me. But Elena has good instincts about people. She said from the beginning that you were different, that you might be the one to change him. Change him? I echoed. Marco seemed to choose his words carefully. Alessandro has always been driven, focused, ruthless when necessary. It's what makes him effective as our leader. He glanced out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. But since meeting you, there have been changes. Small ones, perhaps not visible to most. But Elena and I have known him since childhood. We see them. What kind of changes? He smiles more, Marco said simply. He speaks of the future with hope, not just determination. He's been quietly restructuring certain operations, moving resources away from the more problematic areas of our business. I absorbed this information, not sure whether to believe it. Why are you telling me this? Marco stood, straightening his jacket. Because whatever you decide this week will change more than just your life. He paused. Your phone is on the table in your stateroom. Your brother will likely call soon. After he left, I remained on deck until the chill drove me inside. I picked at the meal delivered to my stateroom, some kind of delicate pasta dish that I barely tasted, and waited for my phone to ring. When it did, exactly at 8, I nearly lunged for it. Michael, I breathed, relief washing through me at the sound of my brother's voice. Hey sis, he said, his tone light. How's the big city treating you? Sorry I missed last week's call. Finals were kicking my ass. I froze. Last week? I hadn't spoken to Michael in 2 weeks. Not one. Which meant, no problem, I said, forcing normality into my voice. I've been busy too. How are classes? As Michael launched into a detailed account of his engineering projects, my mind raced. Someone had spoken to my brother last Sunday. Someone pretending to be me. Alessandro? One of his people? The violation sent a wave of nausea through me. I managed to maintain the conversation, making appropriate responses while my anger built. Michael seemed to notice nothing amiss, chatting about professors and projects and his plans for after graduation. And what about you? He asked eventually. Still seeing that businessman you mentioned? The Italian guy? Another shock. I had never told Michael about Alessandro, never mentioned him in our calls. Another lie. Another manipulation. It's complicated, I said carefully. Listen, Michael, I need to ask you something. When exactly did I tell you about him? There was a pause. I don't know. A few weeks ago? You said you'd met someone, that he was taking you to nice restaurants, showing you around parts of the city you'd never seen before. You seemed pretty into him. Michael's voice turned teasing. First guy you've mentioned since that disaster with Ryan's sophomore year, so he must be special. My blood ran cold. Weeks of false conversations, manufactured updates about a relationship I'd never discussed with my brother. How long had Alessandro been monitoring my calls? Intercepting them? Having someone impersonate me? Soph, you still there? Michael asked. I swallowed hard. Yeah, sorry. Bad connection for a second. I needed to warn him somehow, to let him know something was wrong without alerting whoever might be listening. Hey, do you remember that code we made up when we were kids? For when one of us was in trouble? Michael laughed. The Mayday thing? Where we'd talk about visiting Grandma's grave if something was wrong. Man, we were dramatic kids. Relief washed through me. He remembered. Yeah, that one. I was just thinking about it the other day. Random, but okay. He paused. Everything all right, Soph? You sound weird. I forced brightness into my voice. Everything's fine, just tired. Actually, I've been thinking about taking a trip soon. Maybe to Pittsburgh, to visit Grandma's grave. It's been too long. The coded message hung between us for a moment. I held my breath, praying he would understand. Grandma's grave? Michael repeated, his voice suddenly careful. Yeah, it has been a while. When were you thinking of going? Maybe next weekend, I said, my heart pounding. I'll let you know. Actually, Michael said slowly, I might join you. I could use a break from campus. Let's talk details later this week. Understanding passed between us, silent but clear. Something was wrong. He would be ready. We finished the call with casual goodbyes, but my hands were shaking as I set the phone down. If Alessandro had been monitoring my calls with Michael for weeks, having someone impersonate me, what else had he done? What other parts of my life had he infiltrated without my knowledge? The door to my stateroom opened without a knock. Alessandro stood in the threshold, his expression thunderous. Gone was the controlled, seductive man from this morning. In his place stood someone darker, more dangerous, the true face of a man who commanded an empire built on violence and fear. Going to Pittsburgh next weekend? He asked, his voice deceptively soft. To visit your grandmother's grave? So he had been listening. Of course he had. I stood, refusing to be intimidated despite the fear coursing through me. You've been intercepting my calls with my brother, having someone pretend to be me, feeding him information about us that I never shared. Alessandro stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I've been protecting you, ensuring your brother didn't become concerned about changes in your life that might prompt him to investigate, to put himself in danger, by lying to him, by violating my privacy, my relationship with my only living family. Anger gave me courage. What gives you the right? I told you, Alessandro said, advancing toward me. I protect what's mine. I am not yours, I shouted, backing away until I hit the wall. I never agreed to this, to being watched, manipulated, controlled. This isn't love, Alessandro. It's obsession, possession. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. And what would you know of love, Sophia? Your college boyfriend who cheated on you with your roommate. The meaningless dates you've gone on since moving to New York. Men who saw your beauty but never your fire, your strength. The fact that he knew these details about my past, details I'd never shared with him, only fueled my anger. At least those relationships, however flawed, were based on choice, on mutual respect, not on surveillance and manipulation and lies. Alessandro moved closer, until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Everything I've done has been for you, to keep you safe, to give you the life you deserve. You don't get to decide what life I deserve. I pushed against his chest, surprising both of us with my vehemence. That's my choice, mine alone. For a moment, something like uncertainty flashed across his features, an expression I'd never seen on him before. Then his face hardened again. Your coded message to your brother, he said. What were you planning? To run away? To have him rescue you? His laugh was bitter. From what, Sophia? From luxury? From protection? From a man who would give you the world? From a prison, no matter how gilded? I shot back. From a man who claims to love me but doesn't trust me enough to make my own choices, who spies on me, who lies to me, who manipulates the people I love. Alessandro's hands came up to grasp my upper arms, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold me in place. I have given you choices, Sophia. I brought you here to give you time to decide our future. I've been nothing but patient. Patient? I interrupted with a disbelieving laugh. You've systematically invaded every aspect of my life for 6 weeks. You've been stalking me, controlling me, isolating me from everyone who cares about me. And now I find out you've been manipulating my relationship with my brother? I shook my head, blinking back angry tears. That's not patience, Alessandro. That's calculated manipulation. His grip loosened slightly, something shifting in his expression. You don't understand the threats that exist in my world. The danger you would be in if I didn't take these precautions. I'm only in danger because of you. I pushed against him again, and this time he let me go. I moved to the other side of the room, putting the bed between us. I was perfectly safe before you decided I belonged to you. Alessandro ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration that cracked his usual controlled demeanor. You can't go to Pittsburgh, he said finally. It's not safe for you to travel alone right now. Because of what? Valentina? Your father's enemies? The ghosts of my grandmother's family? I crossed my arms. Or because you're afraid I won't come back. His silence was answer enough. I trusted you, I said quietly. Despite my better judgment, despite all the red flags, I let myself believe that there could be something real between us, that underneath all the intensity and possessiveness was a man who genuinely cared for me. I met his gaze steadily. But you don't care for me, Alessandro. You care for the idea of me, the possession of me, not the real me with my own thoughts and choices and independence. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. That's not true, he said, his voice lower than before. I see you more clearly than anyone ever has, Sophia. I know you, your strength, your fire, your capacity for more than the small life you've been living. If you really knew me, I countered, you would understand that freedom to make my own choices is non-negotiable, that trust is essential, that I can't love someone who lies to me, who manipulates me, who treats me like a prize to be won and locked away. Alessandro's expression stilled, his eyes searching mine. Love, he repeated. You said love. I hadn't realized my choice of words until he pointed it out. Heat rushed to my face. That's not the point. It is precisely the point, he interrupted, moving toward me again, slower this time. You feel it too, Sophia. This connection between us, this inevitability. He stopped at the edge of the bed, respecting the barrier between us. I have made mistakes in how I've handled this. Perhaps my methods have been excessive, but my feelings for you are real, more real than anything I've ever known. The sincerity in his voice made something in my chest ache. That was the cruelest part of all. I believed him, believed that in his twisted way, he did love me. And worse, despite everything I just learned, some part of me still responded to him, still wanted him. If your feelings are real, I said carefully, then prove it. Give me actual freedom, not the illusion of it. Let me make real choices, not predetermined ones. Alessandro studied me for a long moment. What exactly are you asking for? I took a deep breath. First, no more interference with my brother. I talked to him privately, and no one pretends to be me or monitors our calls. After a brief hesitation, he nodded. Agreed. Second, I want the truth, about everything. No more drip-feeding information. No more secrets about my family or yours. No more manipulations. The truth isn't always pleasant, Sophia. I'm not asking for pleasant. I'm asking for honest. He inclined his head slightly. Very well. I steeled myself for the last demand, the one that would truly test his claims. And third, I want to leave this yacht, tonight, to go back to my apartment and have real space to think, without your men watching me, without being in your territory. Alessandro's expression hardened. That I cannot allow. Not with Valentina aware of your importance to me. Not with the families watching. Then we have nothing more to discuss, I said flatly. Because I won't be a prisoner, Alessandro. No matter how luxurious the cell. We stared at each other across the bed, at an impasse that seemed insurmountable. The attraction between us, the connection that had sparked from our first meeting, still hummed in the air, but now it was tangled with anger, betrayal, and the clash of two strong wills. After what felt like an eternity, Alessandro spoke. One night, he said finally. You can return to your apartment for one night. With Marco and two others watching the building. Not you, the building. He held up a hand when I started to protest. That is non-negotiable, Sophia. Your safety is paramount, whether you believe in the threat or not. One night wasn't much, but it was something. A concession, however small, to my autonomy. And after that one night? I asked. Alessandro's gaze was intense. After that, you return here to continue our discussion, to make your final decision with all the information before you. His voice softened slightly. I have made mistakes, Sophia. Let me begin to make amends. Let me prove that what I feel for you is real. Not possession, not obsession, but love. The word sounded strange coming from him. This dangerous man who commanded an empire with blood on its hands. And yet, there was vulnerability in his eyes I hadn't seen before. A crack in the armor of the powerful Alessandro Ricci. One night, I agreed finally. And then, I come back here to finish this conversation. Relief flashed across his features, quickly controlled. Marco will take you home within the hour. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Alessandro. He paused at the door, looking back. If you truly love me, you'll understand that real love doesn't cage. It sets free. Something shifted in his expression. Consideration, perhaps, or the first glimmer of understanding. He nodded once, then left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone again, I sank onto the bed, my legs suddenly weak. I had stood my ground against one of the most dangerous men in New York, and won at least a small victory. But as I began to gather my few belongings, I couldn't ignore the voice in the back of my mind that whispered doubts. Was I fighting against my imprisonment or my destiny? Rejecting manipulation, or denying a connection that transcended ordinary understanding? And most troubling of all, was I more afraid of Alessandro's darkness, or the answering darkness I felt stirring within myself? The familiar surroundings of my apartment felt both comforting and strange after just one night away. I ran my fingers along the worn spines of my art history books, straightened the framed print of Botticelli's Birth of Venus that hung slightly crooked on the wall, breathed in the scent of the lavender candle I always kept on my coffee table. This tiny space had been my sanctuary for 3 years, the first place that was truly mine after college, and yet it felt different now, smaller, less secure. Knowing what I knew about Alessandro, about the world he inhabited, about my own family history, it changed how I saw everything. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. A black SUV was parked across the street, Marco visible in the driver's seat. Alessandro had kept his word about the security detail, at least. I wasn't being watched inside my apartment, but the building was under surveillance. Protection or imprisonment? The lines seemed increasingly blurred. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Hey sis, got your message about Grandma. I'll be in NYC Thursday night. Send me your address. I'll come straight there. Love you. My heart squeezed. My little brother, ready to drop everything and rush to my aid based on nothing but our childhood code. I typed a quick response, assuring him I was okay for now, but that we needed to talk in person. I didn't give my address. Not yet. Not until I decided what to do about Alessandro, about all of this. I took a long shower in my tiny bathroom with its temperamental water pressure, a far cry from the luxurious ensuite on the yacht. As I dried my hair, I noticed a box on my dresser that hadn't been there when I left for Antonio's event. Inside was a delicate gold chain with a pendant, a small rose wrapped around the hilt of a sword, the Rossi family crest. A note in Alessandro's distinctive handwriting accompanied it. This belonged to your grandmother. My father's men recovered it from the villa in Florence before it was destroyed. It should be returned to its rightful heir. My hands trembled as I lifted the necklace. It was old, the gold warm and soft with age. Had my grandmother worn this in Florence, before her family was destroyed and she fled to America? Had she been forced to leave it behind in her escape? I fastened it around my neck, the pendant settling against my collarbone as if it belonged there. In the mirror, my reflection seemed different, my eyes darker, my posture straighter. The woman looking back at me wasn't just Sophia the waitress anymore. She was someone with history, with blood ties to power, with a legacy both terrible and fascinating. The thought sent a shiver through me. Was I becoming what Alessandro had seen in me from the beginning? Was I embracing a heritage I hadn't even known existed a week ago? I spent the rest of the evening researching, using my laptop to search for information about the Rossi family of Florence, about Italian crime families in America, about Alessandro himself. Most of what I found was fragmented, contradictory, or clearly sensationalized. The Riccis operated in shadows, controlling information as carefully as they controlled their territories. By midnight, my eyes were burning with exhaustion, but my mind was still racing. I made a cup of chamomile tea and curled up on my second-hand sofa, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions and revelations. Alessandro had lied to me, manipulated me, invaded my privacy in ways that were unforgivable. And yet, there was truth in what he'd said as well. He had seen something in me from the beginning, something I hadn't recognized in myself. He had offered me a life beyond the constraints of student debt and dead-end jobs. He had wanted to give me the world, but at what cost? My freedom? My identity? My soul? I dozed off on the sofa, still dressed, the Rossi pendant warm against my skin. In my dreams, I walked through the streets of Florence, a city I'd never visited but somehow knew intimately. Alessandro walked beside me, our hands intertwined, his dark eyes watchful as always. Behind us followed shadowy figures. Protection or threat, I couldn't tell. Ahead, a villa with a familiar crest above its gates beckoned. Home or prison? In the logic of dreams, it seemed to be both at once. I woke with a start at 3 a.m, my heart racing. Something had disturbed my sleep. A noise, a presence. I sat up, blinking in the darkness, and nearly screamed when I saw a figure sitting in the chair across from me. "I didn't want to wake you," Alessandro said quietly, his face half illuminated by the streetlight filtering through my blinds. "How did you get in?" I demanded, pulling my knees to my chest, putting distance between us. "I have a key." Of course he did. He owned the building. "You promised me one night alone," I reminded him, anger replacing fear. "It hasn't even been 12 hours. Alessandro leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He looked different, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his hair tousled as if he'd been running his hands through it, his eyes shadowed with what might have been exhaustion or concern. "Valentina's family made a move," he said without preamble. "One of their associates was caught trying to access information about you. Your daily routines, your brother's location at university, your former boyfriends." A cold dread washed over me. "Why?" "Because they see you as my weakness." Alessandro's voice was flat, controlled, but I could sense the rage simmering beneath. "Because if they can't hurt me directly, they'll try to hurt what matters to me. And that's me," I said softly. His eyes met mine in the darkness. Yes, the simple confirmation hung between us. Whatever else Alessandro was, whatever his methods, his deceptions, his feelings for me were real. Dangerous, possessive, perhaps even destructive, but real. "What happened to the associate?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. "He's being questioned." Alessandro's tone made it clear what that entailed. "We need to know how much information was already passed to the Moretti family, how extensive their surveillance has been." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild spring night. "So you came to take me back to the yacht?" "I came to protect you," he corrected. "The yacht is the most secure location right now, yes. But," he hesitated, something I'd rarely seen him do, "I also came to apologize." The words were so unexpected that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. "Apologize?" Alessandro stood and moved to the window, peering through the blinds as if checking the street below. When he turned back to me, his expression was solemn. "You were right," he said. "About the monitoring of your calls with your brother, about the surveillance, about the control." He ran a hand through his hair, confirming my earlier impression that he'd been doing so repeatedly. "I have always taken what I wanted, Sophia, protected what was mine by whatever means necessary. It's how I was raised, how I've survived in my world." I remained silent, watching him, sensing there was more. "But you," he continued, "you make me question everything. When you looked at me tonight and said that real love doesn't cage, it sets free." He shook his head. "No one has ever challenged me the way you do. No one has ever made me want to be better." The vulnerability in his voice, in his posture, was startling from a man who exuded such power and control. "I don't know how to love without possessing," he admitted quietly. "I don't know how to protect without controlling. But for you, I want to learn." Something shifted in my chest, a softening, a recognition of the courage it must have taken for this proud, powerful man to admit such weakness. "Alessandro," I said, standing slowly. "What are you saying?" He crossed the small living room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching me. "I'm saying that I love you, that I want you by my side, as my partner, my equal. Not as a possession, not as a prize, but as the woman who challenges me, who makes me see beyond the limits of the world I was born into." His eyes searched mine. "I'm saying that if you choose to walk away, I will let you go. It would destroy me, but I would respect your choice." The declaration stole my breath. "You would really let me go? After everything you've done to keep me?" "Yes," he said simply. "Because I've realized that keeping you against your will would mean losing the very essence of what drew me to you in the first place. Your spirit, your fire, your independence." I studied him in the dim light, looking for any sign of manipulation or deception. But all I saw was raw honesty, vulnerability, and something that looked remarkably like love. "I don't know if I can trust you," I said finally, "after everything that's happened." "Trust must be earned," he acknowledged. "I've done nothing to deserve yours yet, but I'm asking for the chance to try." He hesitated, then added, starting with complete honesty about the danger we're in right now. The shift in his tone brought me back to reality, to the threat that had brought him to my apartment in the middle of the night. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad enough that I'm asking you to return to the yacht tonight, not demanding it." His expression was grave. "The Morettis have resources, connections. If they've targeted you as a way to get to me, your life is in genuine danger." I moved to the window, peering out at the SUV where Marco kept watch. "And my brother? Is he safe at school?" "For now," Alessandro said. "But if he comes to New York as planned," he let the implication hang. "I need to warn him, to tell him to stay away," I said, reaching for my phone. Alessandro caught my hand gently. "Your calls could be monitored. Not by me, not anymore, but by them." His thumb traced circles on my palm, the familiar gesture oddly comforting despite everything. "Let me send someone to him, someone who can explain the situation, offer protection." The old Sophia would have rejected the idea immediately, would have insisted on handling things herself. But the woman I was becoming, the woman who wore the Rossi pendant, who had stood up to Alessandro Ricci and made him bend, understood the realities of the world we were in. "Elena," I said decisively. "Send Elena to talk to him. He'll be less threatened by a woman, and she has a way of explaining things clearly without causing panic." Alessandro's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "A good choice. I'll arrange it immediately." As he made a brief call to Marco, giving instructions in rapid Italian, I packed a small bag, essentials only, things that mattered to me. The art books my parents had given me before they died, the photo of Michael at his high school graduation, the wooden box where my grandmother had kept her rosary. When Alessandro finished his call, he watched me move around the apartment with an unreadable expression. "You're wearing the pendant," he observed. My hand went to the rose and sword crest at my throat. "Yes, it suits you." His voice was soft, the legacy of two powerful bloodlines, united in one person. I turned to face him fully. "Is that how you see me? As some kind of dynastic merger?" "No," he said firmly. "That's how my father sees you, perhaps. How Valentina fears you. But to me, you're simply Sophia, the woman who spilled wine on my suit and looked me in the eye without flinching. The woman who has turned my world upside down in 6 short weeks." The simplicity of his answer, the honesty in it, made something shift inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider a future with Alessandro, not as his possession, but as his equal. A future where I could use the resources and power he offered to build something meaningful, to make a difference in the world. "If I come with you tonight," I said carefully, "it doesn't mean I've made my final decision. I still need time." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "The danger changes our timeline, but not your right to choose." I slung my bag over my shoulder and took one last look around the apartment. My first real home in New York, the place where I'd struggled and dreamed, and built a life of my own. I might never come back here, I realized aloud. Alessandro moved to stand beside me, not touching me but close enough that I could feel his warmth. "Wherever your path leads, Sophia, with me or away from me, it leads forward, not back. You've outgrown this place, just as you've outgrown the life you were living before we met." The truth of his words resonated within me. Whatever happened next, I couldn't go back to being just Sophia the waitress, dreaming of someday using her art history degree. That woman seemed like a distant memory now, a cocoon I'd shed without realizing it. "I'm ready," I said, turning to face him. "Take me back to the yacht, and then we'll talk, really talk, about what happens next." Alessandro's smile was unlike any I'd seen from him before, not predatory or possessive, but genuinely hopeful. He extended his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. I hesitated only briefly before placing my hand in his. Marco was waiting with the SUV when we exited the building, 2 other vehicles flanking us as we drove through the quiet pre-dawn streets of New York. Alessandro kept my hand in his thumb tracing reassuring patterns on my skin, but he remained silent, allowing me space with my thoughts. The yacht was illuminated against the night sky as we approached the marina, its white hull gleaming like a beacon. Security had been visibly increased. Armed men patrolled the docks, and I counted at least 6 guards on the vessel itself. "Is all this really necessary?" I asked as we boarded. Alessandro's expression was grim. The Morettis wouldn't dare move against me directly, not without support from other families. But you, he squeezed my hand gently. You they see as an unexpected vulnerability, a way to destabilize me before making larger moves. Because they think I'm important to you, I said. Because you are everything to me, he corrected. And they know it. We moved through the yacht to a different stateroom than I'd occupied the previous night. Larger, more central, and I noticed with reinforced doors and what appeared to be bulletproof glass in the windows. My quarters, Alessandro explained as I took in the space. The most secure room on the yacht. I set my bag down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the night was fading, leaving me drained. You should rest, Alessandro said, noting my fatigue. We can talk in the morning. No, I said firmly. I've waited long enough for the full truth. I want it now, while we're both too tired for games or manipulation. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Very well. He gestured to a sitting area by the windows. What do you want to know first? I sat, gathering my thoughts. Everything. Start with my grandmother, the Rossi family, then your family, how they came to power. Then, I took a deep breath, then us. What you really want from me, beyond the romantic declarations. Alessandro poured 2 glasses of water and sat across from me, his posture more relaxed than I'd ever seen it, as if some burden had been lifted now that we were having this conversation. The Rossis were one of the oldest families in Florence, he began. They controlled art theft and forgery, protection rackets, some gambling. Your great-grandfather, Vincenzo Rossi, was known for his appreciation of beauty. He only stole the finest pieces, only worked with the most talented forgers. A small smile touched Alessandro's lips. Your love of art runs in your blood, it seems. I touched the pendant at my throat, imagining this unknown ancestor who shared my passion. The Riccis were newer to Florence but more aggressive, Alessandro continued. My grandfather, Vittorio, wanted to consolidate power, to modernize operations. The Rossi stood in his way. His expression turned somber. In 1955, he eliminated the competition. Your great-grandfather and his 2 sons were killed in what was made to look like a dispute with another family. Only Maria, your grandmother, escaped, along with her mother, who died during the journey to America. The clinical way he described the murder of my ancestors should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if he were describing characters in a history book rather than my own blood relatives. And your family? I prompted. How did you come to New York? My father was 18 when the Rossis were eliminated. He saw the potential for expansion beyond Italy, and America was the land of opportunity. He convinced his father to send him to New York to establish connections. Alessandro's pride in his father was evident despite their complex relationship. Within 20 years, he had built an empire larger than anything the Riccis had controlled in Italy. Shipping, construction, real estate, legitimate businesses backed by less legitimate means when necessary. And you? I asked. Where do you fit in this empire? Alessandro's expression shifted, becoming more animated. I was groomed from birth to take over, but my vision has always been different from my father's. He built through force and fear. I believe in evolution, moving our operations into technology, financial services, global investments, less blood, more profit. He leaned forward slightly. The old ways are unsustainable in the modern world. I've been transitioning our family away from them gradually, much to my father's dismay. This revelation surprised me. You want to go legitimate? I want to adapt, he clarified. To transform our power into something that can endure for generations without the constant threat of war and retribution. The violence of my grandfather's era, even my father's, it belongs to the past. His gaze held mine. Meeting you only strengthened that conviction. How? I challenged. I knew nothing about any of this until yesterday. But your blood knew, Alessandro said softly. The granddaughter of Maria Rossi, raised away from our world but still carrying that fire, that strength. When I look at you, I see the future, a joining of our families, a healing of old wounds, a new dynasty built on more than fear and control. The grandeur of his vision was both seductive and overwhelming. And what would my role be in this new dynasty? Alessandro's eyes never left mine. Whatever you want it to be. Your art history degree could be put to use building the finest private collection in the world, or establishing foundations to support museums and artists. Your intelligence could help guide our legitimate business investments. Your compassion could direct our charitable giving. His voice softened. Or you could simply be my wife, the mother of our children, the heart of our family. The choice would be yours. The future he described was tempting, a life of purpose and power, of wealth directed toward passion rather than mere accumulation. But questions remained. And the illegal operations? I pressed. The violence, the control, the fear? Would I be expected to accept those as well? I would never ask you to participate in anything that compromised your principles, Alessandro said carefully. And as I said, I've been moving us away from the more problematic aspects of our business. He hesitated, then added with surprising honesty, but I won't lie to you, Sophia. Some of those elements remain necessary, at least for now. We have enemies, rivals, threats like the Morettis. I appreciated his candor, even if the content troubled me. And what about my brother? Would he be drawn into this world too? Alessandro considered the question. That would be his choice. Many in our organization have siblings, cousins who live entirely normal lives, protected but separate from our operations. Others choose to join the family business in various capacities. His expression turned serious. But all family receives protection, regardless of their involvement. Your brother would never want for anything. Education, opportunity, security. Dawn was breaking outside the windows, the first pale light of morning reflecting off the water. I had been awake all night, and exhaustion was making it difficult to think clearly. I need time, I said, rubbing my eyes. Real time, to process all of this, to decide if this is the life I want. Alessandro nodded, standing. Rest now. We'll continue this conversation when you've had sleep. He moved toward the door but paused with his hand on the handle. Whatever you decide, Sophia, know this. Meeting you has changed me in ways I'm only beginning to understand. If you choose to leave, I will be less than I could have been with you beside me, but I will let you go. The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability in his posture. It was a side of Alessandro Ricci I suspect few had ever seen. After he left, I collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted to even change clothes. Despite the tumult of emotions and revelations, sleep claimed me almost instantly. I dreamed of Florence again, but this time, I wasn't walking its streets as a visitor. I was standing on a balcony overlooking the city, the Rossi pendant at my throat, Alessandro beside me, his hand entwined with mine. Below us, the ancient city spread out in all its Renaissance glory, and I knew, with the certainty that only comes in dreams, that it was ours to protect, to nurture, to transform. I woke hours later to late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Someone, Elena perhaps, had left a tray with fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee on the bedside table. A note in Alessandro's handwriting informed me that he had business in the city but would return for dinner, and that Marco and Elena were on board if I needed anything. After showering and changing into clothes from my bag, I wandered the yacht, finding it surprisingly empty except for essential crew and security. Elena found me on the sun deck, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline. "You look better," she said, joining me at the railing. "More rested. Has there been any news?" I asked. "About the Morettis? About my brother?" Elena's expression was reassuring. "My husband left at dawn to speak with your brother. He should be reaching him about now." She paused. "Alessandro has called a meeting of the families for tomorrow night. A show of strength, a clear message that any move against you will be considered an act of war." The casual way she discussed such things, as if arranging a dinner party rather than a Mafia summit, was jarring. "Is this my life now?" I asked, more to myself than to Elena. Talk of wars and enemies and shows of strength? Elena's smile was knowing. "It's not so different from the world of art you studied, no? Powerful families, patronage, competition, beauty intertwined with violence." She gestured toward the city. The Medicis were no less ruthless than the Riccis, just more celebrated by history. The comparison was surprisingly apt. "Did you choose this life, Elena? Or were you born into it like Alessandro?" "I was a schoolteacher in Naples," she said, her expression softening with memory. "Marco was assigned to protect a Ricci business interest near my school. He watched me for weeks before he approached me." Her laugh was light, musical. "I thought he was just a security guard with a crush. By the time I learned who he really was, who he worked for, I was already in love." "Did you ever regret it?" I asked. "Entering this world?" Elena considered the question seriously. "There have been difficult moments, sacrifices, adjustments, but no, I don't regret it." She turned to face me fully. "Love is always a risk, Sophia. In our world, or any other. The question is whether the man is worth the risk. And Marco is worth it for you? Her smile was radiant. Every day, even the hard ones. She squeezed my hand gently. Alessandro is not Marco. He carries more weight, more responsibility. His position demands things of him that my husband's does not. But I have known him since we were children, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked the message, her expression turning more formal. Alessandro is returning. He asks if you would join him for dinner in the main salon at 8. She hesitated, then added, he also says to tell you that Elena has made contact with your brother. He is safe and has agreed to remain at his university until this situation is resolved. Relief washed through me. Thank you. After Elena left, I returned to Alessandro's stateroom to prepare for dinner. I found a closet filled with clothes in my size, not the ones from my apartment, but new pieces, elegantly simple, and exactly my taste. Under normal circumstances, I might have bristled at the presumption. Now, I simply chose a midnight blue dress that caught my eye and prepared to face Alessandro again. The main salon was transformed for dinner, soft lighting, a table set for two by the windows, a view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. Alessandro was waiting, dressed in a dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean strength. He turned as I entered, his expression warming at the sight of me. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you for sending Elena to my brother," I replied, accepting a glass of wine from a crew member who appeared and disappeared with practiced discretion. Alessandro nodded. It seemed the best solution. She reports that he was understandably concerned, but has agreed to remain on campus with additional security for the time being. Additional security meaning your men. Yes, he didn't apologize or justify it. His safety is paramount, both for his sake and for yours. We sat at the table, where the first course was served. Something delicate involving seafood that I barely tasted despite its obvious quality. My mind was too full of the decision looming before me. "I've spent the day thinking," I said finally, setting down my fork, "about everything you've told me, about the life you're offering." Alessandro set down his own utensils, giving me his full attention. And I took a deep breath. "I have conditions, non-negotiable ones." His expression revealed nothing. "I'm listening. First, my brother remains completely uninvolved unless he chooses otherwise. His education, his career, his future, all of it proceeds exactly as he wants, with no interference." Alessandro nodded. "Agreed. Second, I want to use my art history degree, not just as a hobby or a side project, but as a real focus. I want to build something meaningful, a foundation, a museum, something that supports artists and preserves cultural heritage." A hint of a smile touched Alessandro's lips. "I would expect nothing less. Your passion for art was one of the first things that drew me to you. Third," I continued, my voice firm, "I want complete transparency. No more secrets, no more surveillance without my knowledge, no more manipulations. I understand that your world requires certain precautions, but I need to be informed, to be part of the decisions that affect me and those I care about." This condition seemed to give him pause. After a moment, he inclined his head. "Within the bounds of security concerns, yes. There may be operations, details that are safer for you not to know, but I will never again keep you in the dark about matters that directly concern you." I nodded, accepting the compromise. "Fourth, and most importantly, your talk of transitioning to legitimate business must be more than talk. I need to see real progress, real change. I won't raise children in a world built on violence and fear." Alessandro's eyes widened slightly at the mention of children, our children, before his expression turned serious again. "That transition is already underway. With you beside me, it would accelerate." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You have to understand, Sophia. Change too sudden could create power vacuums, trigger conflicts more dangerous than the status quo. It must be strategic, measured." "I understand that," I said. "I'm not naive enough to think it could happen overnight, but I need to know that it's a genuine priority, not just something you're saying to appease me." "It is," he said firmly. "It has been since before I met you. You've only strengthened my resolve." I took a sip of wine, considering my next words carefully. "There's one more thing. A test, if you will." "A test?" His eyebrow arched. "Yes, I want to visit Florence, to see where my grandmother came from, where our family's histories intertwined." I held his gaze steadily. "And I want to go alone." Alessandro went very still. The Moretti situation can be resolved, I interrupted. You said yourself you're calling a meeting of the families tomorrow. Once that's settled, once you've made your position clear, I want 2 weeks in Florence, by myself, to connect with my heritage, to think without your influence, to make my final decision with clear eyes. It's too dangerous, he said flatly. It's necessary, I countered. If you truly meant what you said about letting me choose freely, about loving without possessing, then this is how you prove it. Let me go. Trust that I'll return if that's what I truly want. Alessandro stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the city lights. His back was rigid, his hands clasped behind him with tension, evident in every line of his body. And if you don't return? He asked, his voice low. Then you'll know our connection wasn't as faded as you believed, I said simply, that it wasn't meant to be. He turned to face me, his expression raw with an emotion I'd never seen from him before. Fear. Not physical fear, but something deeper, more profound. The fear of losing something precious, something irreplaceable. 2 weeks, he said finally, with security of my choosing, but at a distance, watching over you, not controlling you. He moved back to the table, his eyes never leaving mine. And then you'll return to give me your answer? Yes, I promised. One way or the other, I'll return with my decision. Something shifted in his expression. Resignation giving way to determination. Very well. I accept your conditions. All of them. He reached across the table for my hand. But I have a condition of my own. What is that? His thumb traced the now familiar patterns on my skin. Before you go, before you make this decision that will change both our lives forever, I want you to truly know me. Not just my name, my history, my business, but me, Alessandro. His voice softened. Give me the remaining time before your trip to show you who I really am, beyond the power and the control. The man, not the Ricci heir. The vulnerability in his request touched something deep within me. Yes, I agreed. I want to know that man. Relief washed across his features, quickly controlled. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Then we have a deal, Sophia Riley. The following week passed in a blur of revelations and connections. True to his word, Alessandro opened himself to me in ways I suspected few had ever seen. He showed me the art collection he'd been building since his youth, not just valuable pieces acquired as investments, but works that spoke to him personally, that moved him. He shared memories of his mother, who had died when he was 14, a gentlewoman who had loved poetry, and had taught him that strength could exist alongside compassion. He introduced me to the legitimate side of his business empire, where brilliant minds were developing technologies and investments that had nothing to do with the shadows of his family's past. And at night, he would tell me stories of Florence, of sun-drenched piazzas and ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of loves and feuds and reconciliations. He spoke of the villa that had once belonged to my grandmother's family, now rebuilt as part of the Ricci holdings, but maintaining elements of its original design. It could be yours, he told me one evening, as we sat on the yacht's upper deck under a canopy of stars, a connection to your past, a place for your future. Throughout it all, he kept his promise about transparency. I was included in security briefings, made aware of threats and how they were being handled. The meeting with the families had gone as planned, a show of strength that had forced the Morettis to back down, at least for now. My brother remained safe at his university, with security that was visible enough to reassure me, but discreet enough not to disrupt his life. Most surprisingly, Alessandro kept his distance physically, never pressing for more than the occasional touch of hands, a kiss on the cheek, an embrace that lingered, but didn't demand. He was giving me space to choose, truly choose, without the complication of physical intimacy clouding my judgment. The night before my departure for Florence, we stood on the yacht's bow, the lights of Manhattan creating a glittering backdrop. I wore the Rossi pendant, which had become a talisman of sorts, a connection to a history I was still discovering, still reconciling with the woman I had been, and the woman I was becoming. Are you afraid? Alessandro asked quietly, standing close beside me, but not touching. Of Florence? No, I replied. Of the choice I have to make? Yes. He turned to face me, his expression more open than I had ever seen it. I have one more thing to show you before you go, something I've never shared with anyone. Curious, I followed him to his stateroom, where he unlocked a small safe hidden behind a painting. From it, he withdrew a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. This belonged to my mother, he said, handling it with reverence. Her private thoughts, her hopes for me, her fears about the world I was being raised to lead. He held it out. I want you to take it with you to Florence, to understand the woman who raised me, who tried to balance the darkness of our world with her own light. The gesture stole my breath, this fiercely private man, offering me something so personal, so vulnerable. Alessandro, I began, but he shook his head. No speeches, no promises, he said gently. Just take it, read it, and when you return, whether as my future or as my past, give it back to me. I accepted the journal, cradling it carefully. I will. The next morning, as dawn broke over the city, Alessandro accompanied me to a private airfield, where a jet waited to carry me across the ocean to Florence. The security team he had arranged was already aboard, professionals who would watch from a distance, ensuring my safety without constraining my freedom. At the foot of the jet's stairs, Alessandro took my hands in his. 2 weeks, he said, his voice tight with emotion he was clearly struggling to control. And then your choice. 2 weeks, I confirmed. Thank you for letting me do this. His smile was tinged with sadness. I'm learning, Sophia. Learning that love without trust isn't love at all. He released my hands reluctantly. Florence is in your blood. Let it speak to you. And then listen to your heart. He stepped back, maintaining his composure with visible effort as I climbed the stairs. At the top, I turned for one last look. Alessandro Ricci stood alone on the tarmac, powerful, yet somehow vulnerable, watching me with eyes that held both fear and hope. 2 weeks to connect with a heritage I hadn't known existed. 2 weeks to decide between the safety of the life I'd known and the dangerous allure of the world Alessandro offered. 2 weeks to determine whether the pull between us was truly destiny or merely an infatuation born of power and novelty. As the jet lifted into the dawn sky, I opened his mother's journal, my fingers tracing words written decades ago by a woman caught between worlds, much as I found myself now. The first entry began with a quote that sent a shiver through me. We do not choose our destinies. We can only hope to meet them with courage. Florence awaited, with all its beauty and history and ghosts. And after Florence, a choice that would determine not just my future, but the future of 2 bloodlines that fate or chance had brought together again after generations apart. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the Rossi pendant against my skin, the leather binding of Maria Ricci's journal in my hands. Whatever I decided, whatever path I chose, I knew with absolute certainty that the woman who would return from Florence would not be the same one who had spilled wine on Alessandro's suit 6 weeks ago. That woman, the waitress with deferred dreams and limited horizons, was already gone, transformed by the fire Alessandro had seen burning within me from the beginning. Whether I returned to him or walked away, that fire would never be extinguished again. 2 weeks. And then a choice that would change everything, forever. 3 weeks later, the Italian sun warmed my face as I stood on the terrace of the villa, gazing out over the rolling Tuscan landscape. Vineyards stretched toward the horizon, their neat rows creating patterns of green and brown against the hillsides. In the distance, the spires and domes of Florence caught the late afternoon light, gilded with the same golden glow that had captivated artists for centuries. 2 weeks in Florence had stretched to 3, my exploration of my heritage and my future requiring more time than I had anticipated. Alessandro had granted the extension without question when I'd requested it, a small but significant demonstration of his commitment to giving me true freedom to choose. I heard footsteps behind me, familiar now, the measured tread of a man who moved with purpose and certainty through the world. I didn't turn, keeping my gaze on the landscape, as Alessandro came to stand beside me at the stone balustrade. It's beautiful, he said quietly, not looking at me, but at the view I was admiring. Yes, I agreed. I can see why my grandmother missed it, even after building a new life in America. We stood in silence for a moment, the space between us charged with everything that remained unsaid. I had returned to the villa, once my family's, now his, 3 days ago, but we had not yet spoken of my decision. He had given me space, patience, allowing me to reacclimate to his presence after weeks apart. You've restored it well, I said finally, gesturing to the villa around us, honoring its history while making it your own. Alessandro's gaze shifted from the landscape to me. Some things are worth preserving, even as they transform. His eyes searched mine. You've changed. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. My hand went to the Rossi pendant at my throat, a gesture that had become habitual during my time in Florence. I found pieces of myself I didn't know were missing. In the ancient city of my grandmother's birth, walking streets where both Ricci's and Rossi's had once wielded power, I had felt connections to a past that helped me understand my present and imagine my future. I had visited museums and churches, had spoken with old shopkeepers who still remembered stories of the families that had once controlled the city's fortunes. I had sat in sun-drenched piazzas, reading Alessandro's mother's journal, finding in her words an echo of my own struggles, a woman balancing love with independence, passion with principle. "And your decision?" Alessandro asked, his voice carefully controlled but unable to hide the tension beneath. I turned to face him fully, taking in the man who had upended my life, who had seen something in me I hadn't recognized in myself. In our weeks apart, his presence had never faded from my thoughts, his intensity, his complexity, the vulnerability he had shown only to me. "My time in Florence helped me understand something important," I said. "My grandmother didn't run from who she was. She ran from a world that gave her no choices, no agency. She reinvented herself not to escape her heritage, but to claim ownership of it on her own terms." Alessandro nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "And you wish to do the same?" "Yes." I took a step toward him, closing some of the distance between us. "I choose my heritage, the strength, the resilience, the fire, but on my terms, not dictated by the past or by others' expectations. Another step. I choose a future where I can make a difference, where my passions have purpose, where I'm not just surviving but building something meaningful." His expression remained guarded, waiting for the words that would determine everything. "And us?" I closed the final distance between us, reaching up to touch his face, the first contact between us since I had left New York. "I choose you, Alessandro," I said softly, "not because of fate or blood or destiny, not because of wealth or power or security, but because in you, I've found someone who truly sees me, all of me, even parts I didn't see myself." My thumb traced his cheekbone, mimicking the gesture he had so often used with me. "I choose partnership, not possession. Passion tempered with respect, love without cages." The control he had maintained shattered at my words. His arms came around me, drawing me against him with a desperation that spoke of weeks of uncertainty and longing. "Sophia," he breathed, my name a prayer against my hair. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against mine. "I'm not saying it will be easy," I murmured. "We come from different worlds. We'll face challenges, from your family, from rivals, from our own stubborn natures." Alessandro pulled back enough to look into my eyes, his hands framing my face with a gentleness that belied the strength I knew they possessed. "Nothing worthwhile is ever easy," he said, "but together, we can transform both our worlds, build something new from the ashes of the old." The conviction in his voice, the vision he painted, it resonated with what I had come to understand about myself during my time in Florence. I wasn't just Sophia the waitress anymore, but neither was I merely a Rossi heir or a potential Ricci bride. I was something new, something of my own making. "Together," I agreed, sealing the promise with our first real kiss, a beginning rather than an ending, a choice freely made rather than a destiny imposed. As the sun set over Florence, gilding the ancient city in amber and gold, I thought of my grandmother, a young woman who had fled violence and loss to build a new life far from her roots. I hoped she would understand my choice to reclaim what she had left behind, to transform rather than reject the legacy of my blood. In Alessandro's arms, looking out over the hills of Tuscany, I felt the past and future merge into a present full of possibility. The Ricci Empire would evolve. The Rossi legacy would be reborn, and I would stand beside the man I loved, equal in strength if not in power, guiding that evolution with hands that created rather than destroyed. "Welcome home, Sophia Rossi Riley," Alessandro whispered against my lips. "Welcome to the beginning."